What if the reason you're not saving money has nothing to do with how much you earn and everything to do with how your life is set up? Think about it for a second. Every month, money comes in and somehow it disappears. Not all at once, not in one big mistake, but in small, quiet decisions. A meal here, a subscription there, a quick purchase you didn't plan. And by the end of the month, you tell yourself the same thing again. I'll save next month. The next month looks exactly the same. And that cycle repeats for years. Now, most people respond to this by trying to become more disciplined. They download budgeting apps, they promise themselves they'll stop spending, they try to track every rupee, every expense, every habit. And for a few days, it works. Maybe even a few weeks. But then, life happens. You get busy, you get tired, you lose focus, and suddenly you're back to where you started, wondering where your money went. Because here's the part nobody really talks about. You're not failing because you're lazy. You're not failing because you don't care. You're failing because you're relying on something that was never designed to work long-term. Willpower. Willpower sounds powerful. It feels like the answer. But in reality, it's one of the weakest systems you can build your financial life on. Because willpower changes. It depends on your mood, your stress levels, your environment, your energy after a long day. And if your entire financial future depends on something that unstable, then of course it's going to fall apart. Now imagine a different approach. Imagine waking up, living your life, spending money when you need to, and still watching your savings grow in the background. No constant decision-making, no guilt, no stress about whether you're doing it right. Just steady, quiet progress. It almost sounds too simple, right? That's because we've been conditioned to believe that building wealth has to feel hard, that it requires sacrifice every single day, that you need to be on top of everything all the time. But the reality is, the people who actually build wealth don't rely on effort the way you think they do. They rely on structure. They rely on systems that work even when they don't feel like it. Because they understand something most people don't. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. If your system is broken, if it requires constant attention, constant discipline, constant decision-making, then eventually it's going to fail. Not because you're incapable, but because you're human. And humans are inconsistent. We get distracted. We make emotional decisions. We justify things in the moment that we regret later. So instead of trying to fight human nature, what if you worked with it? What if instead of forcing yourself to save money, you removed the need to decide altogether? Because right now, every time you get paid, you're making a silent decision. You're deciding what to spend, what to keep, and what to ignore. And most of the time, saving is the last thing on that list. Not intentionally, not consciously, but naturally. Because spending is immediate, it feels good, it's visible. Saving, on the other hand, feels distant, abstract, easy to postpone. And that's exactly why most people never get ahead. Not because they don't have the ability to save, it's that your system is designed in a way where saving is always last in line. And anything that's last in line eventually gets nothing. Think about it like this. If you walk into a room where everyone is taking their share first and you decide to wait until the end, you shouldn't be surprised if there's nothing left for you. That's exactly what happens with your money. Your expenses take their share, your habits take their share, your impulses take their share, and saving waits patiently at the end, hoping there's something remaining. But hope is not a strategy. And this approach creates a silent frustration. Because on paper, you feel like you're trying. You're not ignoring saving, you're just not getting to it. But over time, that gap between intention and reality grows wider. Months turn into years. Income might increase, but savings barely move. And eventually, you start believing something is wrong with you, when in reality, nothing is wrong with you at all. You've just been following a system that guarantees failure. A system where saving depends on leftovers, in a world where there are almost never leftovers to begin with. There's a common habit that sounds responsible on the surface, but quietly keeps people stuck for years. It's the idea of saving whatever is left at the end of the month. At first, it feels logical. You pay your bills, you handle your expenses, you live your life, and then you tell yourself, whatever remains, I'll save. Simple, right? But in reality, that leftover almost never exists because spending doesn't have a clear endpoint. It expands to fill whatever money is available. There's always something else you need, something that feels justified in the moment. A better meal, a small upgrade, a convenience that makes your day easier. Individually, these decisions feel harmless, even reasonable. But together, they quietly consume everything. And the most dangerous part is you don't even notice it happening. By the time you check your balance, it's already too late. The money is gone, and saving becomes something you postpone, again. I'll start next month. But next month follows the exact same pattern, because nothing actually changed. You're still treating saving as an afterthought, as something optional, as something that only happens if everything else goes perfectly. And life rarely works that way. Unexpected expenses show up, prices fluctuate, social situations come up, your own desires change from day to day. So when saving depends on what's left, it becomes vulnerable to everything else in your life. And everything else usually wins. It's not that you don't have the ability to save, it's that your system is designed in a way where saving is always last in line. And anything that's last in line eventually gets nothing. Think about it like this. If you walk into a room where everyone is taking their share first and you decide to wait until the end, you shouldn't be surprised if there's nothing left for you. That's exactly what happens with your money. Your expenses take their share, your habits take their share, your impulses take their share, and saving waits patiently at the end, hoping there's something remaining. But hope is not a strategy. And this approach creates a silent frustration. Because on paper, you feel like you're trying. You're not ignoring saving, you're just not getting to it. But over time, that gap between intention and reality grows wider. Months turn into years, income might increase, but savings barely move. And eventually, you start believing something is wrong with you, when in reality, nothing is wrong with you at all. You've just been following a system that guarantees failure. A system where saving depends on leftovers, in a world where there are almost never leftovers to begin with. There's a reason saving money feels harder than it should be, and it's not because saving itself is difficult. It's because every time you try to save, you're forced to make a decision. And decisions are exhausting. Think about how many financial choices you make in a single day. What to buy, what to skip, what to delay, what to justify. Each one seems small on its own, but together they create a constant mental pressure.
Should I get this or not? Do I really need this? I've been working hard. Maybe I deserve it. By the time you've gone through enough of these moments, your brain gets tired. And when your brain gets tired, it doesn't choose what's right, it chooses what's easy. That's where most people lose. Not because they don't understand money, not because they don't care about their future, but because they're making too many decisions, and eventually they give in. This is what's called decision fatigue. The more choices you have to make, the worse your decisions become over time. And saving money in a manual system puts you right in the middle of that trap. Every month you're asking yourself, how much should I save this time? Can I afford to save this right now? Maybe I'll wait until things are more stable. And each of those questions opens the door to hesitation, to delay, to justification, to spending instead of saving. Because saving, unlike spending, doesn't give you an immediate reward. You don't feel it instantly. You don't see a visible result. It requires patience. Spending, on the other hand, is immediate. It feels good right now. It gives you a quick sense of satisfaction. So when your brain is tired and faced with a choice, it naturally leans toward the option that feels better in the moment. That's human nature. Now imagine removing that entire process. No more questioning, no more debating, no more should I or shouldn't I. The decision is already made. Before you even have a chance to think, a portion of your money is already set aside, already protected, already working for your future. And suddenly, something shifts. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're no longer relying on your mood, your energy, or your level of discipline that day, because the system has taken over the part where you used to struggle the most. It quietly removes temptation by eliminating the choice altogether. And when there's no choice, there's no conflict. You don't feel like you're sacrificing something because that money was never available to spend in the first place. It changes your behavior without forcing you to change who you are. You still live your life, you still spend within your means, but now saving is happening in the background, consistently, predictably, without interruption. That's the power of removing emotion from the process, because emotions are unpredictable. They can convince you to do the right thing one day and the opposite the next. They can make you feel confident in the morning and careless by the evening. And if your financial decisions depend on something that unstable, your results will always be unstable too. But when you replace emotion with a system, something automatic, something fixed, you create stability. Not just in your actions, but in your outcomes. You no longer have to win the mental battle every day, because the battle isn't there anymore. There's a subtle shift that separates people who struggle financially from those who quietly build wealth over time, and it comes down to when they choose to save. Most people treat saving as something they'll do later, after the bills are paid, after the shopping is done, after they've taken care of everything and everyone else. Only then do they think about themselves. And by that point, there's usually nothing left. Not because they planned it that way, but because that's how the system naturally unfolds. When you put saving at the end, it becomes optional, flexible, easy to ignore, and anything that's optional eventually gets skipped. Now flip that approach completely. Instead of saving what's left after spending, you spend what's left after saving. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but this one shift changes everything. Because now, the moment money enters your life, you've already made the most important decision. Before bills, before expenses, before impulse has a chance to step in, a portion of that money is already yours, secured, untouched, and moving toward your future. You're no longer waiting to see if you can save. You've decided that you will save, and everything else adjusts around that decision. This is what it means to truly prioritize yourself financially, not in a selfish way, but in a way that recognizes your future matters just as much as your present. Because every time you delay saving, you're quietly telling yourself, "I'll take care of my future later." But later keeps getting pushed further away, and the longer it's delayed, the harder it becomes to catch up. When you pay yourself first, you break that pattern. You remove saving from the list of things to do and turn it into something that happens automatically, without negotiation, without delay. It becomes non-negotiable, just like rent, just like utilities, just like any other responsibility you never skip. Except this time, the responsibility is to yourself. And what's powerful about this approach is that it doesn't require you to change your entire lifestyle overnight. You don't have to cut out everything you enjoy. You don't have to live in constant restriction. You simply create a boundary, a clear line that says, "This is not for spending." And once that line is set, something interesting happens. You adapt. You naturally begin to manage your expenses within what's available. You become more intentional, not because you're forcing yourself, but because your environment has changed. Your spending adjusts to fit your system, not the other way around. And over time, this builds a quiet sense of control. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer hoping. You're no longer reacting at the end of the month. You're leading from the beginning. You know that no matter what happens, no matter how busy life gets, no matter how your mood changes, progress is being made because you made sure of it first. And that's what makes this habit so powerful.
It doesn't depend on perfection. It doesn't require constant attention. It simply ensures that every single time money comes in, your future gets its share before anything else does. One of the most underestimated truths about building wealth is that consistency always beats intensity. People tend to believe that becoming rich is about taking huge, dramatic actions, making massive sacrifices, finding the perfect investment, or discovering a get-rich-quick strategy that changes everything overnight. They think wealth comes from doing something extraordinary once. But in reality, the most powerful force in personal finance is small actions repeated over time. Think about it like this. If you save $100 one month and then do nothing for the next 6 months, the impact is minimal. But if you save $20 consistently every week, month after month, year after year, that small, seemingly insignificant habit starts to compound. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, your wealth begins to grow. And that growth accelerates because consistency allows compounding to work its magic. It's the same principle athletes use. A runner doesn't train for one day and expect to win a marathon. A musician doesn't practice for one intense hour and expect to perform flawlessly on stage. They show up consistently, day after day, sometimes doing boring, repetitive work, and that's what produces results. Money works the exact same way. Most people ignore this because it feels boring. Saving $50 every week doesn't feel exciting. Watching your bank account grow slowly over months doesn't give you a dopamine rush like buying something new or chasing a trend. But here's the catch. That boring, repetitive habit is far more powerful than any flashy financial maneuver you might try. Flashy moves might give a temporary spike, but without consistency, they rarely last. Consistency also builds confidence. Each month that your automatic savings continue, you reinforce the idea that you can control your financial life. You start trusting the system, and trust in the system is critical because it allows you to stay calm when unexpected expenses arise. You're no longer scrambling, guessing, or panicking because you've built a rhythm that works. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about consistency is its invisibility. It doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't make for an Instagram post. But over time, this quiet, almost unnoticed habit turns into a result that feels monumental. People will look back and wonder how you did it, while you simply followed the system without stress, drama, or extreme effort. Consistency is what allows your money to grow silently, steadily, and predictably. It's the backbone of long-term wealth because it doesn't rely on luck, bursts of motivation, or perfect timing. It relies on the simple truth that small, repeated actions done consistently always win over occasional brilliance. It's not about how much you save in one day. It's about showing up day after day, month after month, and letting compounding turn your quiet actions into something extraordinary. One of the most powerful truths about building wealth is that it's rarely loud, dramatic, or glamorous. Real financial progress happens in ways most people don't notice. Wealth is built silently, through habits and systems that work consistently behind the scenes, without anyone applauding, without anyone noticing, and often without immediate gratification. Think about someone who reaches their first $100,000. They didn't achieve it by buying flashy assets, chasing viral investment tips, or pulling off some sudden smart move. They did it quietly, day after day, month after month, often making choices that feel unremarkable, even boring. They set up automatic transfers, they followed their budget, and they invested consistently.